Have you ever stopped to wonder what would it be like to live in a war zone? What if that war zone was your home? Let's journey into the Gaza war, a conflict that has rocked the Middle East. Imagine a place where the threat of airstrikes looms overhead, where the fear of violence is a constant companion. This is the reality for the people of Gaza, a coastal enclave caught between Israel and Hamas, two powers locked in an ongoing conflict. In early October, tensions escalated as Hamas launched surprise attacks across the border, a move that sparked a fierce counterattack by Israel. The lives of ordinary citizens like Abu Samo and his family were upended as they were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge amidst the chaos. The situation was further complicated by misinformation, with AI chatbots providing inaccurate updates about ceasefires. Meanwhile, far from the front lines, international bodies grappled with the unfolding crisis, their responses, or lack thereof, shaping the trajectory of the conflict. As we delve into this complex narrative, we'll navigate the maze of events, from the outbreak of war, to its escalation, the impact on civilians, and the international response. Join us as we chronologically explore the events of this conflict, aiming to provide a clear understanding of what transpired. October 7, 2023. A day that would forever be imprinted in the minds of the Gazan residents. The war had begun. Unanticipated attacks perpetrated by Hamas sent shockwaves through Israel, leaving hundreds of innocent civilians dead and a nation reeling from the sudden violence. The Israeli government, in response, launched a swift and severe counterattack. This was not a war fought on distant battlefields. It was a conflict that unfolded in the heart of cities, in the streets where children once played, and in the homes that once symbolized safety and comfort. Over 123,000 Gazan residents found themselves internally displaced, their homes reduced to rubble by the relentless bombardment. Abu Samo and his family, residents of the Ramal area in Gaza City, were among those who had to flee their home. A warning from the Israel Defense Forces forced them to seek refuge in a hospital, only to be displaced once again due to another impending strike. Their journey did not end there. They found temporary shelter in a hotel, their hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty. This war was not just about the physical destruction. Israel imposed a complete siege on Gaza, cutting off essential supplies such as food, water, fuel, and electricity. This act plunged the region further into darkness, both literally and metaphorically. Power and communication lines already unreliable became even more sporadic, making it difficult for local journalists to keep the citizens informed. Despite the chaos, the resilience of the Gazan residents shone through. They yearned for a ceasefire, a chance to rebuild their lives amidst the ruins. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's words offered little comfort. He declared that the airstrikes were just the beginning. The war had taken a firm grip over the region with no signs of letting up. With each passing day, the situation worsened. The people of Gaza found themselves trapped in an escalating conflict. The Israeli government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, adopted a scorched earth policy in response to the attacks by Hamas. This was a strategy that prioritized destruction over precision, a policy that left no stone unturned, no corner untouched. The border to Gaza was shut tight, a blockade that isolated the region from the rest of the world. Essential supplies, food, water, fuel, electricity, were cut off, leaving the people of Gaza in a dire situation. Power and communication lines, already unreliable, became even more so, making it challenging for the local journalists to keep the citizens informed. The objective of this campaign seemed to be retribution rather than security. The Israeli Defense Forces' own code of conduct, which emphasizes the preservation of human life, was seemingly disregarded. The actions of the Israeli government were seen as a departure from their previous practices of conducting extreme actions covertly. The people of Gaza, already grappling with numerous challenges including limited resources, poverty, and high unemployment, were caught in the crossfire. They were normal people with normal desires for a peaceful life. Yet they found themselves in the midst of a war, their lives disrupted, their livelihoods threatened. As the conflict intensified, the international community watched on, with many questioning the actions of the Israeli government. The Israeli actions were in violation of the laws of war, and they disregarded the rights of the people of Gaza. The world watched, the world questioned, but the world didn't act. As the days turned into weeks, the people of Gaza found themselves trapped, their lives hanging in the balance, their future uncertain. In war, it is often the civilians who bear the brunt of the conflict. The Gaza war was no different. The essence of life, such as clean water, food and electricity, which many of us take for granted, became luxuries that the residents of Gaza could barely afford. Abu Samo, a resident of Gaza, and his family were among the 123,000 internally displaced due to the Israeli bombardment. They fled their home in the Rimal area of Gaza City, seeking refuge in a hospital, only to be displaced once more due to another impending strike. Their situation is a stark representation of the plight faced by many in Gaza. They found temporary shelter in a hotel, living in constant fear of the ongoing attacks. The siege imposed on Gaza by Israel cut off essential supplies, leaving the civilians to fend for themselves. With already unreliable power and communication systems, it became increasingly difficult for local journalists to inform citizens, leaving them in the dark, both literally and metaphorically. The dire conditions in Gaza were not a new phenomenon. The territory has been under Hamas control since 2007, facing numerous challenges, including limited resources, poverty, and high unemployment. However, the conflict has magnified these issues, pushing the civilians into a deeper abyss of despair. Underneath the political and territorial disputes, it's essential to remember the human aspect of the conflict. Most residents of Gaza, like Abu Samo, are ordinary people who desire a peaceful and normal life. Yet they found themselves trapped in a war zone. Their lives turned upside down. The human cost of the conflict was mounting, with the civilians caught in the crossfire. As the conflict raged on, the world reacted, but was it enough? The international response to the escalating violence in Gaza has been, in a word, mixed. In the United States and Europe, the reaction has been somewhat muted. Despite the severity of the situation, significant action to address these violations of international law has been largely absent. The US, a long-standing ally of Israel, has been particularly silent. This lack of response is somewhat reminiscent of the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, where an open disregard for international law became something of a norm. But this time, the silence seems to echo louder than ever. Across the pond, Europe's reaction has been similar. Despite the clear violations of human rights, there has been no significant call to action from the European nations. This raises questions about the efficacy of international law and the role of global powers in upholding it. This isn't to say there hasn't been any action at all. The International Criminal Court has opened a war crimes probe into Israel's actions, a move that echoes their investigation into Israel's actions in Gaza in 2014. This is a significant step towards holding those responsible accountable. However, the question remains, will this be enough? War crimes investigations can often take years to conclude, and in the meantime the people of Gaza continue to suffer. The dire conditions in Gaza, including a lack of access to clean water and electricity, have only been exacerbated by the ongoing conflict. In the midst of this, the people of Gaza find themselves caught in a cycle of violence and deprivation. Yet, despite the hardship, they continue to hope for an end to their ordeal. They hope for a future where they can live in peace and security, without the constant threat of violence hanging over their heads. While the international community's response was mixed, the people of Gaza continued to hope for an end to their ordeal. The Gaza War, a conflict that has left an indelible mark on the Middle East. In the span of just a few weeks, we've seen an outbreak of violence escalate into a full-blown war, impacting countless innocent civilians. We've looked at the reasons behind the conflict, the unfolding of events, and the international response, or lack thereof. From the outset, we've seen how the surprise attacks by Hamas led to a swift and powerful counterattack by Israel. We've witnessed the devastating impact of this war on civilians like Abu Samo and his family, who've been displaced and live in fear, uncertain of their next meal or safe shelter. We've seen the international community grapple with misinformation, as even AI chatbots got their wires crossed on the details of the conflict. We've seen the allegations of war crimes committed by both parties, revealing the darker side of warfare and the disregard for international law. As we close this chapter, let us not forget the human cost of this conflict. The true toll of war is measured not just in the number of casualties, but in the shattered lives and broken dreams of those who survive. And as we reflect on the events of the Gaza war, let us remember the importance of peace and the value of human life.